Only in Nigeria will a flask turn a routine flight into a Nollywood drama that is developing of its own script. So, Kwam, the popular Kwam, the Fuji legend, was boarding a flight, I believe to Warri. That is yet to be confirmed. When he was spotted by one of the airport attendants sipping the liquid content of the flask he was carrying. And he had been approached that you cannot fly with that, of which he insisted on flying. They went back and forth. There were a lot of conversations to the point the pilot actually had to come down to come and try to sort out the issue. In the process, he spilled the content of the flask on the pilot. I think the pilot got angry, decided to want to take off, and Kwam seems to turn himself to this typical Agbero in Lagos that just run in front of cars they don't want to get away. And he decided he was going to be an Agbero for aircraft by standing in front of the aircraft and refusing the aircraft to take off. This is very disturbing because it shows the attitude of the elite and the way they see law, because they think not only are they above the law, they think they should be able to pick which of the laws they want to obey. To the best of my knowledge, there is a protocol that says you cannot go on board an aircraft carrying a liquid above 100 milligram. Now, the content of the flask itself is still a controversy because on one hand, the FAA personnel is claiming the content of the flask is probably alcohol, and the Kwam PR team are claiming no, that is actually water, which I don't believe, because to me, the only reason why Kwam would have acted that way would have been if he was under the influence of alcohol. I don't believe a man of his age will act that way not being under the influence. I mean, he literally was standing in front of the aircraft. As a matter of fact, eventually when the pilot took off, he had to dock so that the aircraft wing won't chop off his head. And in that case, he's putting the lives of the pilots, the other passengers, he's putting all of their lives at risk just because they told him to drop a flask and he's too arrogant to just obey simple policy, simple protocol. But I think there is enough blame to go around. I don't think Kwam is the only one that should be blamed for this. I think the people who is supposed to do the check-in before he even gets to the tarmac also needs to be punished, because if you know that the flask is not supposed to go on board the aircraft, why let it go through security? Why? So I think the people there at the security that are supposed to check the contents of that flask, I think they should be punished as well. Then you have the security team that was actually on the tarmac. I don't understand why they allowed that drama to go so long before he was arrested. They should have put him in handcuffs and have him removed from the tarmac. At least that's the way they would have treated me, an ordinary Nigerian, if I was the one behaving like that. So because he's part of the elite, he gets a special treatment where they have to cajole him before he even attempts to leave the front of the airplane. He should have been in handcuffs. In other part of the world, this would have been interpreted as an act of terrorism. In my own findings, that is what I've seen, that this should have been interpreted in other part of the world as an act of terrorism, because it's like he's trying to hold the passengers hostage. So I think the security team needs to be punished as well. If you ask him to leave the tarmac and he refuses to leave, put him in handcuffs and physically remove him from the tarmac. There are probably people on that flight that has meetings, they have appointments that are time sensitive. So why will one person, because of his ego, destroy everybody else's appointments and everything they have to do just because he's too big to obey a simple protocol? And this is more of an elite thing. Oshomole sometimes ago did his own version of this nonsense as well, where he literally blocked the entrance of a particular terminal, if I'm not mistaken, because I think he came late to his flight. So because you are rich now, other people shouldn't go to where they want to go to. They have to wait for you. So honestly, I'm sad that he wasn't put in handcuffs. I would have loved to see him in handcuffs, because I think at some point, these elites, someone needs to make an example of these elites. But thankfully, I mean, credit where credit is due. Festus Keyamo had ordered his blacklisted from flying for the next 6 months, which I actually think is still a slap on the wrist. I think 6 months is relatively too short. At least he should have gotten like 2 years. Should have been on no-fly list for the next 2 years. So credits where credit is due for the Minister of Aviation. He had ordered for that blacklist. I believe the blacklist is in place. And I think the AG and the IG has been petitioned to have him prosecuted. And I think that is important because people can't keep behaving like this, to think just because you are rich, just because you are influential, just because you have money, you can disrupt everybody else's day because of your ego. It doesn't make any sense. Eventually now, this behavior of this adult man, for example, have now led to the suspension of the 2 pilots. I mean, the 2 pilots perhaps was just thinking this was going to be a routine flight. Is Abuja to worry, couple of minutes, they are there and they are back. And now, they are suspended because one adult choose not to act the way you would expect an adult to behave. You have 2 young pilots that are suspended. Yes, there might be questionable decisions being made by the pilots, obviously, because if people were still on the tarmac, there shouldn't be a reason why you want to take off as a pilot. So why would you want to take off? I don't know the protocol, but I believe the pilot is supposed to get a clearance from the tower, if I'm not mistaken, that the tarmac is clear, you can take off. So the question becomes, did she get a clearance? Which I don't believe she did, because if she got a clearance, then why was she suspended? Except maybe she was already given clearance to take off in the first place. Which, on the other hand, I don't believe so, because if K1 never made it on board, it means the door was opened at some point. So by the time the door was instructed to be closed, the pilot should have gotten another clearance to take off. But as long as it's just suspension for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, pending the conclusion of the investigation, and maybe they just take some kind of courses and all of that, I think it's okay. I mean, a pilot that is in charge of other people's lives should be able to handle their emotions much more than the way they did by trying to take off when people are still on the tarmac. That should never have happened. There are way too many people on that tarmac. If it was just Kwam now, you can say, okay, where Kwam was standing was kind of like a blind spot. But there were a lot of airline personnel that were still on the tarmac, on the ground. Everybody was docking. I think the pilot shouldn't have taken off. But I hope a lot of these elites can learn from this. I hope the AG and the IG do their due diligence and prosecute Kwam. But unfortunately, I don't think it will happen because of its proximity to people in power. I don't think that will ever happen. But let me know what you think in the comment section. Do you think the 6 months blacklist is enough? Or you think we should actually see maybe jail time? Which I know it will never happen. Worst case scenario is going to be a fine. But let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.